Passover approved.
Things like global payments for 8 billion people at the speed of light off of mobile phones with no intermediary, right? So that's interesting. How do I actually do 100 transactions a second if I'm an AI bot and I want to trip through cyberspace, right? I mean, that's interesting. You won't do that without digital energy or digital capital. But the other issue is, well, how do you actually send a bunch of capital forward in time 100 years? Right? And you can't do it with gold. You can't do it with a building. You can't do it with a share of stock. I mean, name a company that's still in existence from 100 years ago off the top of your head where the stock is worth more today in real terms than it was then. It would be kind of challenging, right? So projecting economic energy through time and space has really been more of an aspirational fantasy, right? Or an art than it was ever a science or engineering discipline. Bitcoin, it takes something from the artistic and from the religious and from the political domain, and it moves it into the engineering domain where now there is actually a precise way to move capital around, to store capital, to capitalize. You know, and I guess your question is, how will the world change? Profoundly, right? I mean, I can create an AI that can live in cyberspace capitalized by Bitcoin that will live forever, that'll have economic mortality, that is completely sovereign from a company, a person, a country. That AI could, in theory, split itself, you know, go viral and spawn 10 million more AIs that are all sovereign. It's a life form, right? It's right. I can endow a university, a nonprofit, a foundation with Bitcoin that could conceivably last 1,000 years without anybody working for it, right? I can create new types of entities. I can create companies that don't have a life expectancy of 10 years, and I can create a company with a likely life expectancy of 100 or 500 or 1,000 years. I can have different missions. I can think differently about how I capitalize or finance my country. I think differently about how I build. Every product and service could be different, right? If you think about products that are around us all the time, you know, life insurance products or any kind of annuity products, all of those things, right, will be disrupted. Maybe they'll be dematerialized. Right? There's an entire industry that shuffles around $400 trillion of assets. So we have $400 trillion of 20th century analog assets that are inefficient, that are toxic, that are dilutive, and those are handled by a massive financial establishment that's inefficient, right? And so you have a very inefficient establishment handling inefficient assets, trading them back and forth inefficiently. You could obliterate it all. You could just replace it all with just, I have Bitcoin, I hold it. I don't need the establishment. I don't need the bank to hold it. I don't need the Wall Street firm to trade it. I don't need to trade it. I don't need to diversify across, like, why do I buy the S&P 500 index? Why do I have to buy 500 different companies when I know that most of them are not even that good or that successful, but I have an entire financial infrastructure to trade and rebalance inferior assets as a store of value. What if you just obliterate it all, right? Maybe it all just goes away. So I think the world changes, but it'll change in every sector, in every part of the world at a different rate, depending upon politics, depending upon leadership, depending upon culture. And there'll be profoundly beautiful things that'll be created that you could have never created before. There'll be terrifying things that'll be created that no one conceptualized before, and there'll be parts of the world where they do it the same way in 50 years they did it 30 years ago, I suppose.
This also brings me to a question that I planned before I saw your presentation about global game theory right now. We have in the US elections already Bitcoin a big topic with Trump accepting it, Trump speaking about it. EU election, I saw the Austrian view of it. And I never heard any word of Bitcoin, crypto, or anything of that. So in the EU, it seems to be a non-topic till now, at least like not a public topic like in the American elections. How do you see right now the global game theory with like El Salvador as a small country that goes like bigger steps, America making it more a topic, and then EU, India, China. How do you see the global game theory right now?
Bitcoin insight is restricted to those with a need to know.
I love that rule.
When you have a need to know, when you have a crisis, if your country is in crisis, if your company is in crisis, if your family is in crisis, when the bank freezes and fails and the currency crashes and you have a business or you have a life and you're in that culture, you have a need to know, your eyes are open. Now you start to take Bitcoin seriously. Now you adopt Bitcoin. Trump has discovered Bitcoin. Trump has a need to know. Right? El Salvador, their currency crashed. You know, they had a need to know. I think people in countries like Lebanon, right, they don't have a reliable banking system. They have a need to know. In places where the society is affluent and the leaders are affluent and they feel comfortable and they don't feel threatened or challenged, if they're comfortable in their political standing, if they're not afraid of being driven out of office, they don't have a need to know. If they're not insecure about their currency, if they're not insecure about their banks, they don't have a need to know. Right? In those cases, they'll be the last to embrace Bitcoin or appreciate it because they don't have a need to know. But the world's full of places where you do have a need to know. And it's not just places, but it's peoples, right? The minority out of power, right, who are disenfranchised or disinherited, right? They used to say about America, right? Who settled in America? It was the second sons. It was the second son to settle in America. The first son inherited the family estate in Europe, and the second son wasn't going to inherit anything. And so if the second son wanted property, a future, hope, they got on a ship, they crossed the ocean at great peril to themselves, because there was an entire continent where they might actually get a start and they might have a chance. The second sons had a need to know. And I think Bitcoin is a great equalizer in that regard. You know, the wealthy, affluent, comfortable won't have a need to know. They will be blind to it. And those who are disenfranchised, who are looking for a better future, they are the hopeful ones, but they're also the seekers, the searchers, right? They're going to look, they're going to find it, they are finding it. Hundreds of millions are finding it. They'll embrace it, they'll benefit from it. The rest of the world over time will discover it when they have a need to know.
And that's why I also loved your, I think it was the last rule even, where we spread Bitcoin with love and not hate. Because I was also in that time where like this toxic maxi, like, oh, you have to get Bitcoin, and like you have to do it. But in the last year, I kind of transformed to like, oh, if you're here, if you have questions, I'm here for the community. I'm here for everyone who asks questions and want to learn more about Bitcoin, and I help you. And that I love that rule a lot. And how did you come to that rule, to spread Bitcoin with love and not hate? And also it kind of ties to the other rule with fiat, not against fiat, but for Bitcoin.
Well, it comes from a variety of different sources. My experience in business as a salesperson, and I've had thousands of salespeople that I've worked with or have worked for me over time. I've noticed the great ones, they go and they offer the customer something, and the customer tells them to get out. They're stupid, they're foolish, the product stinks, they don't want it, they don't need it. Right? Really good salespeople, they smile, they say, I understand, I'm here if things change. Call me if you need me, you know. I understand you don't have a need right now, thank you for your time, but here's my card. Should circumstances change, we'll be there. And when I was young, my first reaction was if the customer said they didn't want to buy or they criticized my product, I would get angry at them and say they're stupid. But if you go to a big, there's a phrase, the customer is always right. If you go to a big rich customer, whatever it is, you know, and they say your product stinks, and your reaction is, well, you're too stupid to appreciate it. Years will go by. You know, the existing thing they're using will break. They will need your product. They won't remember whether they were mean to you. They will definitely remember if you said something mean to them. So if you actually got in a fight with them the first time around, then they'll just remember that you were rude to them. They won't call you back. They'll go to vendor B or vendor C or vendor D. So it's very bad game theory, you know, to tell the customer they're wrong, especially when they're wrong. If the customer is rude to you, you don't get rude back. You smile, you take your beating. The customer is always right, and you just stay ever present in a cheerful, constructive way, because over time, that sales behavior is the behavior that wins you the customer, and eventually you'll have a lot of happy customers, and they'll all kind of laugh, and they'll say, oh, you know, Mike, I don't remember, when did we first meet? And, you know, and you'll say, well, you know, the first time we met, you kicked me out and told me I was a moron, and they're like, oh, I don't remember that at all, did I do that? I'm sorry I did that, you know. Like, and that's the story of life with all salespeople everywhere. So think like a salesperson. Of course they don't appreciate what you have to offer when they first hear about it, because people's natural reaction is always to reject the new. You know, another experience I have is just looking at, you know, behaviors on social media like Twitter. Someone posts